Hey, this is Quentin at the Business Academy, and I am joined here by my partner, Dr. Gary Rademacher. And here we are on the Cairo Business RX podcast for another episode. Today, we're going to discuss customer service. How do you really stand out? And this really ties in a lot with staff training, staff hiring, and what are you going to do with, bringing on that great experience for your patients, which is really not that hard these days. So, Gary, what we're noticing and what I'm seeing a lot is the quality of employees that you can get these days is not the same as what it was, say, 10 years ago.
Sure.
And there's many offices that are seeing that. In fact, there's plenty of offices that are saying, hey, we'll only hire somebody that's at least 35 or over to be a CA. And so with that, certainly society is in a place where, God, I had an employee that didn't even know how to address a letter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's not even taught in school these days.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't even know where do you put the address and where does the stamp go? And I was, made me feel old.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get that in, but then, back in the day, somebody would greet somebody with "Good morning, sir," and or "ma'am," or whatever. And I've seen it in offices where, it's like, "Hey, how you doing?" Or like they're smacking their gum, reading their phone, and "Yo," as the person comes in.
Yeah.
And it's an important point. It's sort of like we're looking at giving the patient, showing them the importance that they have, and then really bringing that about to excel as a practice.
Yeah. No, we've had this conversation before, and we've discussed this. It's easier today than it ever has been to really stand out from the crowd. When you start offering just really good service, having good manners, the yes sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, it's the it's being polite. It goes a long way because you don't see that in businesses today nearly as much. And so when you actually have systems and you train people up appropriately, you really do stand out, and you're delivering that 5-star experience. And I think that what I see, at least in offices that are 2 or 3 staff, they start to build up and they're so busy, but they don't take the time to schedule in training, right? Like there's no training time. To me, it's such an important part of a business that I used to actually have training time set aside every single day. And it'd be on different things, but like if it was the front desk, there might be a day on just training on greeting. Like, how do you greet the patient coming in? Number of times over, it'd be scripting and role playing. How do you answer the phone with a smile? What are the top 10, 20 questions that you get so that you know exactly how to answer a question, on the phone? And so little things like that go a long way at increasing your professionalism in the eyes of your customer.
Sure.
It goes a long way. I mean, it's interesting in today's environment, to your point. And I don't know if it's so much a quality of a staff member as it is, I feel like our school systems are failing us in not preparing, our younger generation for the real world.
Right.
Like, to your point, not knowing how to address an envelope. I've seen people not knowing how to write a check, because they're so used to, the systems are changing, but there's still that, you got to know that, right?
Yep.
It hasn't completely gone away. And so, because our school systems, I feel, are failing us, we actually have to do things that maybe we haven't done before when it comes to training a staff member. Because I think at the heart of it, people want to help others. They're good people. They just need apprenticing.
Right. And so, in your office, when you say you were, and that's a great point of doing staff training every day. as you get busy, as the schedule goes and so forth, what are some of the best times to do staff training?
Mm-hmm. You know, I used to schedule. I changed it up throughout the years into different times. But I always like first thing in the morning. You get in, you huddle up, you get ready for the day, and you take 10, 15 minutes to train up on something.
Right.
And it depended on the position in the office as well. Like a case manager who, the schedule might be busier at certain times of the day, I'd pick a slower time and I'd block off a half an hour, and they would train daily on role playing, on scripting and handling objections, or, they'd look at what they had coming in that afternoon so that they would look to see like, hey, what was that patient's main problem? What was their motivation? What was their values for wanting to do care? And role play that patient coming in, just preparing for it. A front desk you might do 15 minutes before a shift starts.
Yeah.
So if you have 2 shifts today, I'd have 30 minutes, 15 minutes before and 15 minutes before the second shift to make sure they're sharpening the axe. Doctors, I used to have doctors train, on I'd have a half a day. Like, this is just my schedule, but on Fridays, I used to see patients from just like 10 to 1.
Yeah.
But we would come in at 7 and we'd have a team meeting for the week, preparing for the next week. We'd go over, any problems that were occurring, what went well that week, team wins. But then we would all break, and I'd have the front desk do training, the case managers do training, and the doctors do training. And I'd have doctors role play on scripting, doing exams, table talk. How are they communicating with the patient? It's easy for a doctor to talk about what's going on in the world, or sports.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to focus, and that's okay in small doses.
Sure.
But I always wanted my doctors to be educating the patient on their health concerns and what their goals were, and to teach them about chiropractic, because you don't see that. Like when the patient leaves the office, they don't see anything about chiropractic.
Right.
There's not this big chiropractic budget like Big Pharma has in having commercials or radio ads or magazine ads. So to me, the patient had to always be continually educated on what we do, because even like if you do an effective report of findings where you're educating the patient, that's one time. And so if a patient's coming in for a series of visits, we made sure that we were educating the patient every single visit that they came in.
Sure. No, I think that's great, is that you've got your shift, and let's say you start seeing patients at 9 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's there at 8:30 in the morning. Okay, great. We're huddling. You're doing a basic training, and as a shameless plug, the Business Academy, we've got our whole training portal. Mm-hmm. You could show one of those videos.
Yeah.
Right. We've got thousands of videos on there. You could show one of those videos to the entire staff and say, great, here we go. And then we'll go through it and role play briefly and, get everybody in and up and ready for the day right there.
Yeah.
And then every week, a 3-4 hour block to just do training.
Uh-huh.
And to really get into that a lot more in depth and to handle these different things.
Yeah.
Is a very important, part of, of what that is.
Yeah. On that note too, you said 3 to 4 hour block. I think it's important for the owner of a business. I don't care what type of practice you have, whether it's straight chiropractic, if you're medically integrated, if you do functional medicine, but I think it's important to have quarterly meetings where, the owner is actually discussing the dream.
Right.
Like forecast, like what's the dream of my organization? Like what are our targets?
Yeah.
And why? I think the more that communication is had with staff, it's getting everyone on the same page. Like,
right.
Here's why we do what we do. Here's why everyone has a valuable final product that is exchangeable, and that we're all on the same team, and is very purpose-driven.
Right.
We always talk about purpose is senior to everything. That's something that has to be discussed, not just at that quarterly meeting, but all the time. But you set it in a quarterly meeting.
Sure.
And you openly have a conversation on it, and you make sure that everyone is vision casting and is on the same page. and you're going over with the staff the personal, professional, and the financial goals that they may have, but they need to understand what the business's professional, financial goals are as well, and the owner's goals, because if we're all aligned, we're going to get there together.
Right.
I've met with people before where they don't do any of that. They hire someone, they're so busy, they plug them in, they expect them to read their mind and know, what the purpose of the organization is. And, I think people expect people just to step into a role and do it with no apprenticeship. And so, this labeling goes out from there, like, oh, people just aren't trainable, or people just aren't like what they used to be. I think that there's a lot going around, but personally, I feel like it's taking personal responsibility as an owner, that you're making sure that training is in, those meetings are in, and you're setting the tone of the group.
Right. And so that's a great point in terms of, we've got to hire the right people, but there's so many doctors that I speak to that are looking for somebody who's already perfect when they go to hire them, and not thinking with all of the training, all of the onboarding, the statistics, the systems, and the different things, which, systems into a practice, and the training and all of that takes ordinary people and makes extraordinary results through doing that. So that kind of comes back to the key hiring point, and what are the biggest things in a hiring aspect that would be like, no, I'm not going to hire this person, or yes, I'm going to hire this person, knowing that you've got a good training system in place.
When I would interview people, I would be very interested in what's their motivation.
Yeah.
Like, what's their what is their purpose? Like, what are they wanting to do? And does it align? As I'm asking them questions, how old were they when they first started working? Are they production oriented? Are they someone who, has a goal and can attain it? Like, and simply asking questions like, hey, when's the last time that you had a big goal and you accomplished it, and how did it make you feel? Can they even come up with something?
Sure.
I would like to know, this is positional, like with a case manager. I'd want to know, do they have empathy for people? Do they want to help people?
Empathy is a really key point on a case manager.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to drive in and get somebody through their stops and barriers. You've got to be able to show that in a medical office for sure.
Absolutely.
Or chiropractic office.
Yeah, you got to care.
Yep.
You got to care about that person who's sitting in front of you. And, I would even ask, what does someone like to do in the evenings or the weekends?
Right.
I want to know their activity level. Like, do they like to be active? Do they, do they donate time to their church or to a charity? Really what makes them tick is what I'm looking for. And, because to me, everything is trainable.
Yeah.
Everything is trainable except for what's in here.
Right.
Like, I can't fix a lack of empathy.
Sure.
Right. I can't fix someone who doesn't give a shit about other people. Excuse my language, but you can't fix those things.
Yeah.
But I can train everything else.
Right.
And so if someone has the willingness, to join the team and wants to help people and cares about people and has a purpose and has a vision, man, they're going to do great in my organization.
Great. And what are some of the things that would be a hard no in your interview process?
If it's a chiropractor that I'm looking for what's their conviction. Why did they become a chiropractor? If I'm looking at a professional, if I'm hiring a medical provider, why did you become a medical? Why? What was that moment that you decided that you wanted to do this, and why was that? I'm always looking for someone who, the best providers I've ever hired was someone who was bitten by that help bug, because maybe they had a problem and they were helped. Like for a chiropractor, maybe they had an issue and a chiropractor helped them, and they're like, hey, that's exactly what I want to do. Or they helped a family member. They have a lot of conviction, right? some things I would avoid. I'd look at if someone, believe it or not, if someone hasn't started working until after college and that's their first job, like the work ethic isn't established very well.
Right.
Not for everybody, but the earlier someone starts working, in my experience, 12, 13, 14, the better work habits they have.
Sure.
So those are a few things that I would look for.
Yeah. One of the things that I see in interviewing people is, obviously if they come in with a resume, one of the things I look for in a resume is, can they hold down a job for a long time?
Yeah.
Right? Have they gone to a lot of different types of jobs? And then I'll usually ask them about their last jobs and see what do they say. If it's all on somebody else and, they did this, they did, if that person is readily talking down their last employer, you know what they're going to do when they leave my employee as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so, it's a point of a tone level point there where, well, where are we going with this? Like, what are you looking to achieve? Where, how does that go? And if they're, totally responsible, I had a lady come in and she said, she worked at another company for 2 or 3 years. And then she said, you know what? I made a mistake. It was a mistake that was so bad they had no choice but to let me go. And I've completely learned from my mistake. And, I'm looking for another job now. And I was like, to me, that was refreshing. Mm-hmm. I was impressed. I was like, okay, well, this is actually responsibility for that. Mm-hmm. And I hired her and she became a great employee.
That's a great point. Because when people go for an interview, they're always putting their best foot forward, right? That's in my opinion, the best you're ever going to see someone is in that first interview.
Right.
That's what you're getting, right?
Right.
You're probably a little bit less than that typically. And so, yeah, that would be refreshing for someone to actually say, hey, this is what didn't do great. Here's how I learned from it. That goes to the questions of like, hey, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Like when you ask someone what's their weakness, can they just outwardly talk about their weaknesses or they have a hard time finding it?
Right.
Right. It's like, because we all have weaknesses, but are we willing to discuss them and say, hey, this is what I need to learn, and I'd be willing to do that. I'm really looking for willingness.
Yeah. 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 And if you have the willingness and you've got a good staff training in place and you can go through all those different things and you can really create a team, then through that, you can bring things about. The other thing that we were talking about is customer service. If you want to have that amazing customer service, train your staff. Train your staff, put your attention into them, get all those different things going. Just like it goes over and over again of how do we do this? How do you answer the phone? How do you greet a new patient? How do you handle a recall of a patient? All of these different things. It's all covered in our training. But the more that you just do that, and if you just train every day with your staff and do that training, and don't let it go out because we're too busy. Well, we're too busy because we're not doing those things. And then really put in a good staff training, once a week. Then that way, this is how our top offices just do phenomenally well. I mean, we talk about that in our mastermind as, and they're looking for new ways to train and new things to train on and things like that. This is where the office really elevates.
Yeah, and what it really does is, if you look at the top offices out there in any business, it's their systems.
Yeah.
And when you train up, number one, you have to have systems. You can't go free willy-nilly, right? And so if you have systems and you train on it, what that does is it increases the speed at which you do things. And it's the speed at which things are done that equates to the number of people you eventually can serve. It's even like this, I think for those of you who are in an office, that you might relate to this, the speed of a file, how quickly a file is routed through your office. Like if you are into doing insurance reimbursement, I know that in my office, a patient came in, there would be, that file would start at the front desk. It follows the patient through. But when the patient leaves, that file is still moving. Yeah. Right? It has to go to the doctor for the diagnosis and the plan of care. It has to go to the billing department Insurance needs to be verified, and you need to cross your T's and dot your I's in the billing department before that file comes back to the front desk for that report of findings date. How many times have you guys, has a patient come in, you can't find the file?
Right.
It's the speed of the flows in your office, whether it's a patient, a file, your team meeting. Your team meetings do not need to be long either. Like, get to the point, and what's the purpose behind it, and it's the speed at which those things occur that dictates. I always like to look at like the number of people you could serve, but really how powerful you become as an office is the speed at which things happen.
Right, and the patients notice it. Patient walks in, signs in, they're right back on to treatment. There they are, whether the doctor's ready or not. Okay, great. They're on to something as far as treatment goes. Good. Okay, there we go. Whereas, a patient sits in the front office for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, that really brings things down. Yep. And it's just a different customer service.
Yeah,
there.
That's a wow factor in of itself. Having good systems, many offices do not have them anymore. And so when you walk into an office that has excellent systems, that doesn't mean you're perfect. We're not looking for perfection here. We're looking for excellence.
Right.
That means doing the best you can in that moment, as many moments as you possibly can, right? And that never-ending improvement mentality. People see that when they walk into an environment.
They do.
And that starts from the top. That starts from the ownership. You're not going to have someone come in on the street as an employee and set the tone for that. That starts from the top. And that means those of you who may be watching this, if you're an owner, that starts with you.
Yep. Great. Good. Well, yeah, no, I mean, all of those are great points. And like I said, we've got a lot of staff training. What we do at the Business Academy is we train you, we train your staff. We've got our online training that you can do. And like I said, you could pick up a video every day and do that. The case manager training, we're doing more associate training, and we're doing another one of those trainings coming up here in October, which will be phenomenal. We're doing training for medical providers. The more training that goes in place, the better you have systems in, the better your customer service is, the better your office does. Anything else you'd like to say before we end off?
No, I think this is a great topic. I think the more training that you put in and the more you focus on customer service, the better your office overall is going to do.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, yes. So thank you very much for listening to our podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.